The Chicago Cubs season in 2023 has officially come to an end. We talk about what went wrong and how we're feeling coming up next.
You are Locked On Cubs, your daily Chicago Cubs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cubs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please support the show now more than ever in the offseason on your preferred audio platform, and you can watch, subscribe, and leave a comment on YouTube. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are lifelong fans taking our passion into a discussion with you on all things Cubs. Monday's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome in to a Monday show. Happy Monday to everybody out there, and happy October, believe it or not, to everybody out there. And we're here, and the Cubs season obviously has officially come to a close. And a lot of people have messaged me, and I saw some people on Saturday at a wedding, and they were asking me, so what are you going to do on the show now, and what's there to talk about? And the honest answer is I'm not sure. This was a crazy roller coaster. And I think on this first show, especially without Matt being here, because I know he has his perspectives and takes on things, I think I'm just going to offer a reflection on to kind of where I'm at, how I evaluated this season. And initially, right now, this is obviously an initial reaction because it's still very, very fresh. The wound is still very, very fresh. And I think, we'll get into what Tom Ricketts said, maybe a little bit of a preview on what went wrong and things of that nature. But, I want to keep it as lighthearted as possible, but I also want to keep it as real as possible because, I owe you guys that. So, the Cubs went 1-5 this last week of the season. They finished the season 7-15 in their last 22 games, and were not able to make the postseason. So before I get into what went wrong, I want to tell you guys my honest take of what I think, this season looks at or how I look at this season. And before I do that, I want to read a couple of quotes from the Cubs talking about elimination. The first one is from Justin Steele, and Justin Steele, his quote is, "There's a million ways you could paint this picture. You could look at it as a failure. We didn't make the playoffs. You could also look at it as we were looking 50-50 whether or not we should sell or trade at the deadline. We made a really good push, made a move, and then we went on a run and we put ourselves in a position to compete for a playoff spot. That's really exciting stuff. For me, I look at the season as a success," end quote. Ross was a little bit, I'm not going to read his whole quote, but the gist of it was, quote, "Disappointment. We can all feel that. I'll soak that in and remember how that feels and use that in the offseason to get better and continue to grow and come back next year and take another step forward." He went on to say we didn't win enough games and, it wasn't good enough. And that's obviously another way. And then I thought Dansby Swanson's quote was interesting. His was a little bit more of a self-reflection. Quote, "Frustrating, especially being in every game against good teams and grinding our way, but just not making it happen. Just playing bad, which I own. Just haven't performed in moments recently. Stinks," end quote. So the reason I read those is because there's a lot of different perspectives a fan could have about the 2023 Chicago Cubs season. And I've already talked to a lot of people that share those different perspectives. You can say, "You know what, Sam? What did you have them before the season started?" And actually, it was 83 wins. I think we did a win prediction show, and I think I landed on 83. So they finished exactly where I had them. But a lot of people had them in the 70s. Their Vegas over-under was about 75.5, 76.5. And you could say, hey, the goal, Sam, you said it yourself. The goal was to play meaningful September baseball, and they accomplished that. And the other perspective is, they didn't get the job done, and they should have. And it was a collapse. And here is my perspective that I offer you. And I apologize to you if this makes your day worse. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not trying to, paint a bad picture for you. I'm hurting just as much, if not more, than all of you are from this. But my job is to come on here and be very honest. And here's the scenario I offer you. and we have a lot of people that work in business and probably know a scenario like this more than me, but I'll offer you my perspective of it. Let's say you meet with your bosses and you have a sales job and you oversee a region, and in the new fiscal year you create a revenue goal of generating $1 million in revenue. Okay. And the first 6 months of the year, you're rolling. You generate 750,000 in revenue. And the last 6 months, for whatever reason, things fall off a cliff. And you generate just about 250, and you're just around that $1 million goal. When you come to that next meeting, do you think your bosses are going to come in and give you a standing ovation and applause because you hit your revenue goal of 1 million? Or do you think they're going to be more concerned at what happened the second half of that year that caused you to go from 750 to 250? And are they going to be concerned that that's going to bleed over into the next year? From my work experience, it would be the latter. The point I'm trying to make is expectations change based on performance. So, yes, going into the year, if you told me the Cubs are going to be playing September competitive baseball, I would have said bravo and let's do it. But if you told me they were going to be 76 and 64 with a 92% chance to make the postseason going into the last month of the season, and then told me they weren't going to make it, I would say that would be a total unmitigated disaster. 7-15 in their last 22 games. And remember, out of those 22 games, besides for Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly, and maybe Mitch Keller, if you want to put him in that arc as well, they did not face any ace pitchers. They had 6 games against the Rockies. They missed Burns, Woodruff, and Peralta. They missed Strider, Morton, and Fried. They had a situation. And then the second time when they played Arizona, they missed Gallen and Kelly, right? They faced Davies and Fat and Ryan Nelson, and they couldn't beat one of those guys. I fully understand that the 2023 Cubs, it was a crazy year with tons of positives. And I think as the offseason progresses, we're going to feel very good about where we're headed in 2024. But my initial reaction is disappointment because this was a real life Chicago sport collapse the last month of the season. And there's plenty of reasons for it, and we're going to get into it. But my perspective is this. I feel like 2 things can be true. I like where the Cubs are headed. There's a lot of great things going on, but I still can't, that still doesn't overtake what I just witnessed this last month of the season, especially even just this last week. They got walked off 3 times. They came up 2 games short of the playoffs. If they just went 3-3 this week, they would have snuck in. If they just found a way to not have, you could do this all day, right? It was so close, and to come up that short when they were playing so well, I can't look at it from Justin Steele's perspective. Now, maybe I will in a little bit. I'm more of the David Ross, Dansby Swanson thing where it really stings. And, that's where I'm at. And it stinks. We're all going to do this together in terms of talking about it and getting over it. I think watching the playoffs, maybe a team like the Braves just runs through the National League, that'll make it easier for us. Time heals all. And so I think in a couple of weeks, we'll feel much better than we do now. And then by winter, we'll be talking about moves and Bellinger and possible additions. And then before you know it, it'll be February, it'll be pitchers and catchers reporting, and we'll be back to where we are. But right now, with the wound this fresh, I can't sugarcoat it. I can't say that everything's great and I feel fine. I don't, but that'll change. A lot contributed to the last month of September. And I just want to touch on a little bit of it right now. I'm going to wait for Matt to really do the deep dive, but to me, it really came down to 3 factors. Number one, and most importantly, was a fatigued and injured bullpen. From June to August, the Cubs won 19 out of 25 one-run games. In April and May and September, they were a complete disaster in one-run games. What was the difference during that time? They had a solidified 7, 8, 9 in their bullpen with Merriweather, Leiter Jr., and Alzolay clicking, healthy, and executing. And when those guys, Alzolay got hurt, Mark Leiter Jr. might as well have been hurt. He lost the feel for a splitter. I don't know how that happened. I don't know if it was injury related. Maybe that'll be something that comes out later on. And then Fulmer got hurt. And then Merriweather really was the only guy you relied on. And you look at the last week of that season, the biggest innings of the season, Drew Smiley was on the mound. Jose Cuas was on the mound. Daniel Palencia was on the mound. These are starter, guy that wasn't on the team, and a guy that started at Double-A, right? It wasn't supposed to be like that. That's how a season goes. That's how the cookie crumbles. But it played a huge factor in the Chicago Cubs' demise. And it'll be something that has to be addressed in the offseason. I don't know, in free agency or internally, to make sure that the Cubs start out April having a much better idea of who their relievers are, how they're going to execute, so they don't waste 2 months like they did in 2023 trying to figure it out. So then it all feeds off each other. It's all complementary. You win more games in April and May. You're not so fatigued trying to get back to it in July. You avoid the September collapse. So that's one thing the Cubs are going to have to figure out, but a lot of it at the end of the year wasn't their fault. It was a lot of injuries. The second thing, and people won't like to hear this, so I'll keep this brief, is luck. It's bad luck. It's bad luck. Injuries, the calls that went against them, the Saturday night game in Arizona where Bellinger got hit by a pitch and Wisdom was confused on a foul ball, the ball that deflected off Wisniewski's backside that Swanson may or may not could have caught. It had a feel the last month of the season. Any possible thing that could go wrong would go wrong. To blow 5 games where you had a lead going into the 8th inning in 1 month is really hard to do. Just really hard. To blow 7 leads in the 8th inning or later, including extra innings, in 1 month is almost impossible to do. And that just takes some luck. They got walked off twice by Cincinnati, once by Arizona, twice by Atlanta, and once by the Brewers. They got walked off 6 times in 1 month. It was a month from hell. And in a perfect storm, sometimes things have to go wrong. And luck doesn't have to go your way. If this Cubs team had no luck at all, they'd be in the postseason. And the last thing is the managing and the margins. And this is something that we've talked about all year. If you're an original everydayer from when we have this show, this is something that I expressed on your very first show. I don't think David Ross is a very good manager. I don't think he did a great job this year. And from what Tom Ricketts said on Sunday on the marquee broadcast, he's going to be sticking around. So he's going to have to improve if this team's going to improve. And we're going to talk about that coming up next. But first, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create the account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We are back on this Monday episode of Locked On Cubs, breaking down how I feel about the 2023 Cubs, kind of what went wrong. And then Tom Ricketts today, the chairman of the board, the owner of the Chicago Cubs, made headlines and said a lot of things. Me and Matt will talk about it. But the big takeaway I had today was his quote about David Ross. He said, Rossi had a great season. The players play hard for him. He's our guy. Well, to me, that sounds like a vote of confidence. And even though ultimately, it is Tom Ricketts' call, but it's not. I mean, I think if Jed really felt strongly about letting David Ross go, Tom would do it. But it doesn't sound like that's going to happen. And I know that's a surprise to a lot of people. Came to a surprise to me as well, because I think when you have a collapse like that, when you lose 15 of 22 in the fashion that you did, and you finish with 83 wins, and the team that finished ahead of you had a run differential of about 150 plus runs less than you, and pretty much every metric all around the league had you as an 89, 90 win team, and you underachieved, you usually have to take a look at the manager in that scenario. But it doesn't sound like the Cubs are going to. And like I said before the break, even before I had this show, pretty much it was about late 2021 when I started to really question David Ross as a leader and as a manager. That bled into 2022, and it's more apparent now than ever. Now, it's not to say that he can't improve, but there's going to be a lot that needs improvement, and we're going to talk on this show about a lot of things in the offseason. We're going to discuss Bellinger. We're going to discuss the potential of adding a star like a Juan Soto or a pitcher, a major free agent pitcher market, maybe even if it's from overseas, and third base and first base and the bullpen. But I'll say it right now in this show, and I will continue to say it all offseason. Last year, I said the same thing all offseason. I said April and May are the key. You have to have a good April and May. And it really kind of turned out to be totally wrong. So take it for what it's worth. Now, you can make the case that if they had a better April and May, they wouldn't have collapsed and been in a better position. But to me, no matter what the Chicago Cubs do in the offseason, the biggest thing that this organization needs to improve at internally is the margins. The margins. Turning 3-2 losses into 3-2 wins because of one simple play or one simple decision, okay? Here's a great example. Friday night in Milwaukee, 10th inning, Cubs-Brewers, 3-3 game, I think it was, or was it 4-4? I can't remember the score, but it was tied. Nico Horner gets hurt. Ross has to sub him in, I think, with Mastroboni, and then he pinch hits Wisdom early, and Yan Gomes isn't able to deliver in a rare situation, which he had been all year, and it's first and third, 2 outs. Mike Tauchman's at the plate, tie game. You feel good about Tauchman in this spot. Cubs end up stealing second, and Craig Counsell says, you want to steal second? First base is open. We got Patrick Wisdom on deck in Nico Horner's spot. We're going to walk Mike Tauchman and get to Patrick Wisdom right on right. Patrick Wisdom, probably the worst guy in the entire organization to have up in a spot like that when you just need a base hit. Strikes out on about 4 pitches. Beautiful managing by Craig Counsell. A lot of people would say, hey, why'd you give him second base? Because in an extra inning game, that ghost runner that ghost runner is always going to score, but you don't want to give up the second run. And Counsell said, who cares about the second run? Bases loaded, 2 outs. Get me Patrick Wisdom. We'll get out of this inning scoreless. Bottom half of the inning. Man on second, obviously, ghost runner, no outs. Carlos Santana, right on left against Quas. One of the Brewers' most dangerous hitters. Cubs could walk him, set up a double play or set up a bunt attempt, and then walk the next guy and then set up the double play or the force at home. Ross just pitches to him. Pretty predictable outcome. Santana singles to left, game over. Those are the margins. Those are the areas that the Cubs have to improve in. And that's not all managing. There's Jed Hoyer's involved in that. The bullpen's involved in that. And the players are involved in that. But that's the part of the game that, to me, the Cubs, no matter who they add this offseason, and I've seen a lot of people say, hey, the Cubs just need to build a roster that's so great it's manager-proof and David Ross can't screw it up. And that's fair. But I don't know if that's realistic. They have to improve on the margins. They have to improve with their decision-making. And David Ross is a human. Humans can improve. I'm not saying that David Ross cannot be a good manager in Major League Baseball. But he even said in his own quote, there's a lot of things we got to improve on, a lot of things they got to look at. The first thing he needs to look at is the mirror. And he needs to say to himself, okay, and Matt and I are going to break down these games, and we're going to give you more examples, just like I did, of decisions that were not hindsight thinking, that were obvious in the moment, that were incorrect. And he needs to get better at those, because if he gets better at those decisions and the Cubs get better on the margins, they could run this same exact team back and they'll win the division easily. Easily. Because that was this team's biggest flaw. Timing, sequencing, clutch pitching, clutch hitting, decision-making, the right moments at the right time. And I think that, more than anything, more than Juan Soto, more than Pete Alonso, more than any pitchers, is what this organization needs to get better at as a whole. Because there's a lot of things that are going very well right now. The minor leagues, the development, Seiya Suzuki's last couple of weeks. We're going to talk about it all. Nico Horner, Justin Steele, Jordan Wicks had a hiccup, but his production was really good down the stretch. Adbert Alzolay. There's tons of things. I could talk for an hour about all the good that's going on in this organization. But it'll always feel short until they could figure out how to maximize that positivity by being the best possible team they can be on the margins. And to me, that starts and ends with the leadership in the clubhouse, the decision-making in the clubhouse, and the manager of the baseball team. So if David Ross is going to be back next year, which it sounds like he's going to be according to the owner and the chairman of the board, the first thing that this organization needs to do is have their manager look in the mirror and think about how he can get better, and everybody else will fall in line. That's pretty much where I'm going to wrap up. I think Matt and I, the rest of this week, have some more fun stuff planned. We're going to talk about some fun games, some brutal games. We're going to have a whole episode dedicated on the biggest positives that we saw. And it should be an okay week. We are starting the therapy session now. We are starting the recovery session now. The initial part, always hard. Let's get to the playoffs. I don't know how much of the first round I'm going to watch, like the Diamondbacks, Brewers, no thanks. Marlins, Phillies, no thanks. We should be in one of those series. But as it progresses, I'll get into some playoff stuff. And like I said, I think time will do us all well. Hopefully some team like the Braves just dominates the postseason, and we could say to ourselves, who cares? We wouldn't have beat that team anyway. And we could start moving on to 2024, because I do believe that 2024 could be a very fruitful year for the Chicago Cubs. But they have to get better in a lot of ways in the offseason. And we are going to be talking about that almost every day on this show. Shout out to the everydayers who are with us all 5 episodes throughout the week, and you can become an everydayer by checking us out each and every weekday. Be sure to hit that subscribe button for Locked On Cubs on YouTube and smash the like button for the algorithm. We're also on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts and streaming on Sirius XM. I am Sam Olber. This is Locked On Cubs.